Bright Duty. Every student matters.
Hello dear students, welcome to another lecture. In this class, we are going to begin with Unit 4 of Class 12 Education Novel on Board, which is Heredity and Environment. Now, in this chapter, we aim to make you people understand the meaning and the definition of the word heredity. We will make you understand how do we classify heredity, biologically, mentally, as well as socially. We are going to learn about the theories of transmission, the traits, the qualities that we acquire, that we inherit. We are going to learn about the theory of transmission of such traits. We will also learn the law of heredity, like the Beckett's law, the law of variation, the law of regression. We will understand and define environment. We will learn how do we classify the environment, that is physical, mental, social and cultural. We will also understand the controversy, or basically the fight, the problem that everybody has in understanding the difference between heredity and environment. We will understand the connection between heredity and environment, and also how does heredity and environment help one in education. So these are all the things that we aim to learn by the end of this unit. Now, first thing that I would like to tell you people is that the word heredity, the etymological meaning of heredity. Etymological means how is heredity defined or originated. The origin of the word heredity and its meaning. So the word heredity was originated from a Latin word means hereditas. And what does it mean? Something that we have got, something that the children have got from the parents. So what they have inherited, what the children have got from the parents is what heredity means. So on the basis of this etymological meaning, this, origin that we have learned about, heredity means the transmission, when the genetic characters, the genes of one generation are transmitted, are passed on to the other. This is known as heredity. So, the movement of genes from one generation to the other refers to heredity. This process begins from the mating process, that is when the ovum of the female meets the sperm of the male during conception. That is what is known as the mating process. And the process of heredity, that is the formation of genes as the transmission of genes, begins from that stage onwards. Now, we all know that every human being that we can see around us has a different pattern, has a different personality, has a different behavior, has a different attitude towards things. Now, this is because of the difference that exists between the individuals, and this difference is on account of heredity and environment. What we have inherited from our parents and the environment that we live in. What is the physical environment that we are exposed to? Now, when we talk about the role that heredity and environment play in one's life, we need to understand that it is because of heredity, it is because of environment that one develops a personality. Whatever attributes we develop in our personality are all because of heredity as well as the physical environment that we are exposed to. No person is born without heredity because we are a result of mating and therefore we inherit the gene. And therefore, if we develop, if we are provided with a good environment, then our development, our growth will always take place in an appreciable manner. Now, the heredity of an individual, as I told you, it begins from the moment the conception takes place, the mating takes place. There are some or the other factors, some or the other environmental conditions which influence your heredity, which influence your genes at every stage. Every quality, every behavior, every response that a human being exhibits, it depends on our heredity and the environment in which we were raised. And therefore, if we have to understand an individual, it becomes primitive for us to understand the heredity and the environment of an individual. So every individual, it is very important. You must have understood how important it is to understand heredity. Because the moment the conception takes place, there is biology involved, there is a biological process which takes place inside the body of a female, owing to which embryo develops and the genes are transferred. We have learned in science that when two germ cells they meet together, that is when an organism starts. The ovary, is the place where this mating takes place. So what happens in the ovary? An ovum, which is also known as an egg, is present. So the ovary of a female, the egg is present, and ovum has got 23 pairs of chromosomes. Alright? So inside the human ovum, inside the human female egg, there are 23 pairs of chromosomes, which are present in different shapes and different sizes. And inside the male sperm also, there are a lot of germ cells which are present. In a germ cell which is there in the male also, there are 23 pairs of chromosomes. So when the female chromosome meets the male chromosome, this process leads to fertilization and a new life begins inside the ovaries of a female human body. What happens in this process, in the fertilization process? The cells or the chromosomes, which is the part of heredity. So because of this entire fertilization process, the new life that begins inside the female gets the heredity, gets the chromosomes of his or her parents, and this is what determines the heredity of a child. The child, along with those chromosomes, carries along a lot of changes, a lot of strange behavior that was present in both the parent, not just the one, but both the parents. And therefore, a child is a combination of both. The structure of the child's body, the complexion, the hair, height, facial expressions, features, your nose, everything is a part of what you have inherited from your parents' genes. According to the geneticists, sex is also inherited. Whether you are going to be born as a male or a female, that is also inherited. It is said that when, there are two chromosomes which are present inside the human body, X and Y. if the X of male, the bigger one is basically X and a smaller chromosome is Y. So what happens is, if the germ cell, which was engaged in the formation of a creature, X chromosome of the mother and X chromosome of the father enters. If both the X chromosomes enter, then it is going to be a female, girl will be born. And if the germ cell is one is X and one is Y, then the child will be a male. So there are different chromosomes and the chromosomes have been classified as X and Y. X chromosome is the big chromosome and Y chromosome is the small chromosome. If the mother and the father, if the X chromosomes of both the mother and the father meet, then a girl is born, and if one is X, one is Y, then it is a boy who is born. So this study of the chromosomes, has revealed that obviously the X chromosome is strong. We know it is bigger, so it is strong chromosome as compared to the Y chromosome. And therefore we say that the heredity that we as individuals get depend on the genes of our parents. Whatever one gives to the child through the genes, the child inherits that. Okay? So whatever the child does, that has got very little role of the child himself or herself and a major role of the genes that have been forwarded to the child by the parent. Let us look at a few definitions of heredity. So heredity is basically the total, the sum total of the individual traits which are not born. What is inside us and not born, that is heredity. Heredity, according to Gilbert, refers to something that is transmitted, that is forwarded by the parents to their kids through the biological and the physiological processes. According to Ruth Benedict, heredity means the transmission, when the traits, the qualities of the parents are transmitted to their children, to their offspring, that is also heredity. According to Douglas and Holland, heredity refers or it consists of all the structures, the physical structure, the physical characteristics, the way the human being functions, the different capabilities, the skills that the child has, everything is determined by the ancestors or of whom they have inherited. According to H.A. Patterson, who is another psychologist, heredity can be defined as what we get from our ancestors, from our parents, our great-grandparents. According to R.S. Woodward, heredity covers all the factors that are present in the individual when the life begins. Not at the time of birth, but the life begins at the time of conception. Those 9 months before the birth, that is when the heredity process takes place. Now let us learn the mechanism of heredity. So what is the mechanism? How does this heredity, the entire functionality of heredity work? The first and the foremost thing is mating, as I told you. It is the first step for reproduction. This is the mating. This is the union of a male sperm and the female ovum. The result of it is a zygote. So when the male sperm meets the female ovum, the result of it is zygote. So this is the first step. Without mating, there can be no reproduction that can take place. The second factor or the second thing after mating is growth. The growth depends or it involves the division of the fertilized cell. So the growth means how much the zygote or the fertilized cell divides, how much it multiplies in nature. Another factor which contributes to heredity is chromosomes, as I told you. Every woman has 23 chromosomes, every man has 23 chromosomes. So in totality there are 46 chromosomes, and it is on the basis of these chromosomes also that the child gets the heredity, inherits the traits and the features. Then we have genes, as I told you. Every chromosome further consists of 40 to 100 small particles, and those particles are known as genes. So when the mating process takes place, it is not only the chromosomes that are going to determine your traits or your characteristics, but the genes present in your chromosomes which will further decide what is important. Then we have the chance factor. Both the ovum as well as the sperm, before the fertilization takes place, as I told you, there are 23 pairs of chromosomes in each, right? At the time of conception, when the fertilization actually takes place, the genes which are a component of the chromosome, so the genes of the chromosomes of the sperm, they pair with the genes of the ovum. So the chromosomes of the ovum. And that is how the qualities, the characteristics, the features and everything of the offspring, of the unborn child is determined. And this union, the result of what happens after mating, after chromosomes, after genes, after chance factors is heredity. So the end result of the union that takes place between the genes of the sperms as well as the ovum is what is heredity. Now let us discuss what are the different types of heredity. Now the first type of heredity that we have is biological heredity. Now what do we mean by biological heredity? Biological heredity simply means that the species are going to have the same species as their offspring. A human being will give birth to a human being. A cow will give birth to a cow. A horse will give birth to a horse. A dog will give birth to a dog, right? There is no change, there is no denial, there is no exception to this rule that can ever take place. And in the same manner, the brothers and the sisters, they have a lot of resemblance, they look a lot like their parents with respect to their size, their structure, with respect to how they appear, their physical appearance, their color, their weight, their height, the color of their eyes, how strongly they are built, if there is any disease they have inherited, and so on and so forth. So this is why the brothers and sisters have so much in common, because the genes of the parents are the same. Then we have the concept of the identical twins also. You have heard about it. Identical twins, they resemble each other at birth. They are exactly the same in every aspect. Then we have the concept of fraternal. Fraternal twins, they do not look like each other. They do not resemble each other. But a majority of their characteristics are the same. Okay, identical twins are those who are exactly the copy of one another. Fraternal twins are those whose maximum characteristics are the same. And siblings are those who have a lot of common characteristics since they are born out of the same parent. So this is the biological heredity. Now we have the mental heredity. Now, apart from the physical characteristics, obviously, the intellects, the cognitive abilities of the child, how well the mental processes of the child function, that also determine on the heredity or on the genes that they have inherited from their parents. Every child who is born, the activities, the skills that every child at birth exhibits are the same. Every child learns how to suck the finger or the thumb. They know how to breathe. They laugh, they cry, they move their hands and legs, they make certain sounds. So it all remains the same. All these instincts that the child does are inherited from the parents. This is what they have taken from their genes, from the genes of their parents. How intelligent the child is, this also is inherited from the parents. Okay? How skilled you are, how smart and intelligent, brilliant you are, what all calibers you have, everything you've inherited from your parents. There are some research which also shows that if a child has got some criminal tendencies, if a child, let's say, is a kleptomaniac. Kleptomaniac is somebody who has a habit of stealing small things for fun. So, if there is any such crime or any such, problem that you inherit, then that also has been inherited by you from your parents. Next, we have the social heredity. Social, as the word I always say, is derived from society. So how well you are able to interact with the people around you, the kind of social etiquettes that you have, whether you are a lawful or an unlawful person, you believe in customs and traditions, the mother tongue that you have, what is your thinking process, what is your ideology, what all are the religious books that you read, what are the pictures that you see, what is the kind of art that you are interested in, what are the kind of monuments that you are interested in. Everything has been inherited by you from your parents. So in totality, what we can summarize is that social heredity refers to whatever past achievements have been there. From generation to generation. Not only your parents, but your parents' parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. So the accumulation of the achievements of all the ancestors in your family are going to be developed in you. Then the kind of educational environment, the education of your parents, the education of your grandparents and the great-grandparents again determine your heredity. And yes, something very important for each one of us to understand is that we are not born with the social heredity. Okay? Biological heredity we are born with, but social heredity is something that we develop. It develops gradually in us. We are not born with. Why is social heredity important? Now, social heredity is important because without social heredity, a man is not going to be strong enough, irrespective of the biological traits that they have inherited. Unless and until a man is socially sound, unless and until a man is socially active and involved and has got the right attitude and etiquettes, he is not going to be a complete man. Next, your parents, your teachers, the kind of society that you are surrounded with, everything comprises of the environment. So the parents, the teachers, everybody has the responsibility of ensuring that the environment that is given to the child is proper, is beneficial, and that the child is able to acquire the maximum benefit out of it. Because after all, the chromosomes and the genes of the child are further going to be transmitted, right? Now let us talk about the transmission of the social traits or the acquired traits. Now, first of all, acquired means something that we have inherited. Okay, something that is not ours, but we have got. So, what is the theory? What is the process that lies behind the transmission, behind this further processing of the traits? Now, according to Weisman, who was a very famous psychologist, according to him, the parent, is the only one who is responsible for the ideal production of the child. Okay? According to Weisman, the heredity or the genes of the child do not depend on the grandparents or the great-grandparents. It is entirely dependent on the parent. And he reached to this conclusion with the help of an experiment on rats. Okay? So he cut the tails of the rats, and then he noticed that the offspring of the rats were also born without tails. So this was the first theory for the transmission of traits. So according to Weisman, only the traits of the parents are transmitted onto the children. According to Lemma, another psychologist, he believes that only the favorable, only the good variations or the good features are passed on to the next generation, not the bad ones. And this was believed by Darwin also. Okay. According to McDowell, who conducted an experiment, he proved with the help of his experiment that only a few of the habits were transmissible. Not everything that we are today has been transmitted to us by our parents. Only a few of it has been transferred to us. How did he prove that? Now he took rats in a tank, and there were two, gangways. There were two ports which were charged with electricity. The first generation of the rats, they continued to commit the errors by getting in touch through the gangway or through that port which was charged and getting a shock in return of it. But the generation, the offsprings of these rats, as soon as the generation moved ahead, as soon as there were the offsprings of these rats, the errors decreased. That is, the errors that were done by the parents now reduced when the children were born. In the 23rd generation, so first generation, the parents, the rat parent basically committed the error by going through the charged gangway again and again. The offspring decreased the chances of this error. In the 23rd generation, only 25 of such errors were committed. And therefore it was believed that with each passing generation, the lessons that were learned by each generation were not transmitted, were very consciously transmitted to the next. So basically, only The good or the favorable aspects are transmitted, and the errors that are committed by the parents keep on getting filtered and are forwarded or transmitted in a very reduced number. Now, according to McDougall, the instincts of the parents, you know, the brain waves, the ideologies of the parents, they also are transmitted to the offspring. The instincts means the habits that pass on from generation to generation. Okay? These instincts or these racial habits have been preserved in the human generation for a long time. These are those instincts that stayed with the grandparents and then they forwarded on to your parents and can further be seen in you yourself as well. So the instincts are also transmitted. This is what McDougall believes in. Animals, on the other hand, they, acquired this habit. This also was an instinct in an animal. Instinctively, the animals know that in case of a danger, they have to run away. So again, your instincts are inherited, are transmitted as well. As soon as or as and when the generation keeps on succeeding, they keep on moving from one to the other, the habit or these instincts are also transmitted, and therefore your instinctive action are developed in you. They are independent of your experience. Your instincts are never dependent on your experience. Your instincts are something that you have inherited from your previous generation and are there in you by default. And they cannot be changed, they cannot be denied. Now, let us discuss the laws of heredity. Now we are going to learn 3 laws of heredity. The first law of heredity is like begets like. You must have got a clue of this law, like begets like. It says that children are going to be like their parents. Okay? The parents or the characteristics that the parents have, they are going to produce an offspring possessing the same characteristics. So a child will always take after his parents, be it in size, be it in the color, be it how bright, how dull, how intelligent, how smart, how wise they are. This has been explained, this has been researched by the biologists that children, they will resemble their parents very closely because of the germ plasm which was present in them. And that is why a cat will always give birth to a kitten, a Negro will always give birth to a Negro. Okay? So this theory has also been criticized. There have been a lot of errors that have been found in this theory. Firstly, because of the exceptional cases. It is said and it is believed that children of the intelligent parents are not necessarily intelligent. Criminal parents not necessarily give birth to criminals. Secondly, the environment plays a very crucial role in this. Environment plays a role in deciding the future characteristics and traits of a child. In the words of Bagley, another psychologist, environment is how you are going to get the stimulus. You get the trigger in you because of the physical environment you are exposed to. Heredity is going to, decide your nature because of what you have inherited. But the way you will react, the way you will behave is going to be determined by both heredity as well as the environment that you are in. Okay. Now the second law is the law of variation. Law of variation, variation as we all know is derived from variety. Okay, the differences. So, in addition to the above law that we have learned that like begets like, right? According to this law, variation will take place at different steps during the fertilization process. So at different steps of fertilization, the variation will take place. There is going to be some or the other difference that can be noticed in the fertilization process in the embryo and thereafter the child. And there are double the number of chromosomes in the sperm or ovum. So the genes, as we know, are more in the chromosomes present, and because of the double number of genes which are there in the chromosomes, the variation, the variety, the difference that can be seen in the offspring is also widespread. Now, there is a chance for variation when only 24 pairs out of the total pair of chromosomes are selected. There is a chance for variation in certain combinations. So, again, this is an entire biological process. Only when there is the mating of the genes in a specific manner, the variation can be expected. If the genes mate in a prescribed manner, there will be variation. If they do not meet in a prescribed manner, then there will be no variation that can be. As it has been described to you in detail, in any human being, there are these many number of combinations of the chromosomes. Okay. So, this number of different kinds of sperms and this number of different kinds of eggs are possible inside a human body. Any sperm might fertilize any egg. A sperm, when enters the female body, does not decide which egg it has to target. It can be any. Which means that almost 300 trillion different kinds of fertilized eggs are possible. And therefore, there are 300 trillion possibilities for an offspring to develop. So the uniqueness, you can see, dear students, is such. And this process is known as meiosis. Meiosis explains how there are different combinations of genes which give birth to different types of children. So how the different combinations that take place in the genes will give birth to the different kinds of children. Parents are the same, but the chromosomes present in both the parents are different. And when they combine differently, the offspring is going to be different in itself. Okay. Now these chromosomes, they are not going to remain the same throughout the life. A lot of it depends on the physical as well as the mental characteristics of the parents. So how how physically and mentally sound were the parents at the time of conception, that is going to determine the production of an offspring. So according to this law, child is not going to be similar to the parent, but will be different from them because of these, 300 trillion possibilities in which the child can be formed. And this is due to the variance in the combination of the genes. Short parents can even have tall children and vice versa, because the genes that combined at the time of conception were dominant in the tall characteristics. So the child can certainly have can have a great height. Next is the law of regression. Law of regression states that with every passing generation, the variation moves towards the average of the species of which they form a part. What does this mean? In layman's language, it means that if supposingly the father was a very tall man, the son may or may not be tall. This is because the qualities or the genes that the son has inherited from the father are going to get regressed towards the normal human height. Let us talk about the tallest man in the world. That tallest man in the world might not have the tallest children in the world as well. Why? Because of the law of regression. Because this quality is going to regress, because the variations in the genes are going to regress in the human being. Okay? So this law is the result of some statistical calculations. And this law of statistics is known as normal probability, which means that there is always an average height, there's always an average mean, there's always an average IQ, there's always an average strength, there's always an average intelligence, there's always an average beauty. And 65% of the population is always going to be found around this average thing. So 67% of the population will have the average height, weight, body strength, and so on. The remaining population that we are left with, 16, 1 by 2 are abnormal on the positive side, and 16, 1 by 2 are on the negative side. What does that mean? Almost, when we are left with, let's say, as I said, 67% of the population is going to be around the normal, the average characteristics and qualities. The remaining 33% are going to be further divided. They will be abnormal. Abnormal means they will have some additional characteristics, but on the positive side. Okay? A better height as compared to the average height, a better weight, and a better beauty, a better strength as compared to the average, individual. And half of them are going to be changed in a negative manner when we talk about the physical disabilities that will be developed in the children. So basically, the limit to which a human being develops is determined by 3 standard deviations on the side of the mean. We are going to learn about standard deviation and mean in the last chapter of your book. So let's say 60 was the average height. 60 was the average height. The maximum and the minimum height will be 50 to 70. Persons who belong to the height range of 55 to 65 are considered average or normal. Their children will have the same height. But if supposingly the height of the parent is 70, that is, it is touching the extreme side of the average, will the offspring also have the same height? Maybe, maybe not. The offspring may have the same height as the parent. The offspring may even try to regress, may even try to come back to the normal height and maybe 65 or 60, but not necessarily 70. Similar is the case with those parents who are dwarfs, who have a very short height. A dwarfish parent who is, let's say, just 50 inches. They may have children who are 55. They may have children who have 60 also, but not necessarily will have only 50. So basically, the regression that takes place will only take the offspring towards the normal. So a dwarf will never give birth to a dwarf. An abnormal heighted parent will never give birth to an abnormal heighted child. This is what is the law of regression. According to Galton, another psychologist, he believes that the heredity of the child is determined by the immediate parent. So only 50% of what the child derives is dependent on what he has got from the parent, and the remaining 50% is dependent on the ancestors. So even if the parents were short but the ancestors were poor, the child is very much possible and probable to get a better health. So this means that the child possesses just as many qualities and traits of the parent as the child does of the grandparent. Okay?